So we are in a very precarious position in this country. We need a political change, but we also need to resolve to resist. Hey, thanks for watching our live stream. I'm the host, David Krayden. In the meantime, have a look at some of these clips and take the opportunity, please, to like this broadcast, ring the bell, or subscribe.
And we're stepping up in every way we can because we know that Russia must win this war. That Ukraine must win this war.
But freedom is something you earn every day.
I don't know that the government currently has fiscal anchors.
Your home is your castle. We're calling on the government to introduce and immediately pass the Stand on Guard law.
But we also need to resolve to resist. Thanks for joining us today, and welcome to Stand on Guard. I'm your host, David Krayden. Got a lot to talk about today, as we always do. These are exciting, but also very distressing times in many ways. And we'll be back in mere moments to bring you today's news.
The Prime Minister lied, and his minions continue to lie.
Your home is your castle. We're calling on the government to introduce and immediately pass the Stand on Guard law.
But we also need to resolve to resist. So we want to talk about a lot of things. Digital ID today. I want to talk about Donald Trump's message to the United Nations, which was both exhilarating and, as usual, a little distressing, at least in one point. But that's what Donald Trump gives you. At least it's not constant distressing, like it is for Mark Carney every time he opens his mouth. And want to remind you here, if you want to really help this video, give it a hype the video. And it's extremely, I don't think a lot of people in Canada are even aware of this function now, but you can do this, and I'll revisit this before the end of the broadcast because it will help. And given yesterday, I hope so many of you enjoyed the interview with Katie Passatney, who joined me for over 45 minutes to talk about what she's been through. And we're going to talk a bit more about a status update at Universal Ostrich Farms. And Katie texted me late last night, said everything was cool, everything's fine, but they're sitting on the edge of their seats there because they're worried about Monday. And the CFIA, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, continues to act like thugs, trying to capture ostriches in their ridiculous hazmat suits, which are about as necessary as an astronaut's outfit, because they really think they're either on the moon or they're not sharing the same reality with the rest of us. But they continue to harass the ostriches, harass Katie and her family. They continue to be a massive pain in the ass for absolutely no reason. And we're concerned that Monday could bring some bad news. So this is not the time to say, okay, it looks like they've got this under control. Not as long as Mark Carney is Prime Minister, not as long as Heath MacDonald is Agriculture Minister, not as long as we have Gestapo-like agencies like the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, and not as long as the RCMP are in the pocket of the Liberal government. Nobody's safe. And we'll get back to that in a minute. Just a little bit of other issues here I wanted to pick up on. Now, I asked the poll question this morning, do you think war with Russia is imminent? Well, NATO has been harassing Russia for the past year, and Russia has finally said, look, you guys entered this war on the side of Ukraine. You've got people on the ground. You've got boots on the ground. You're using US and British armaments to attack Russia. So obviously Russia has made the assessment that NATO is at war with Russia. NATO cannot be at war with Russia because that's going to be the end of the world as we know it. And get a load of this. A lot of people are saying, Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense in the United States, has ordered a rare urgent meeting of hundreds of generals, admirals. Well, you know why he's done that? And I don't believe it's because they're preparing for war. You don't bring every admiral and general, and he literally has at the 1-star to the 4-star level. And that is hundreds, about 400 admirals and generals. I think, and from what I've read, and from what I know, Pete Hegseth has been doing at the Department of National, it's now the Secretariat of War. And did I say defense? Yeah, he's now the Secretary of War, not defense. I'm so used to saying that. The reason he's got all of these generals and admirals in town is to tell them why he's making 20 to 30% cut in the general staff. Because the United States, and Colonel retired Doug McGregor has pointed this out a multitude of times. The United States has more admirals and generals now than it did at the height of the Second World War, when it had a huge military presence around the world, in the Pacific, in Europe, and in North America. And they've got more admirals and generals today. They've got more 4-stars today. And that is exactly why they're saying he wants the cut by 20 to 30%, and he wants the generals and the admirals to be on side. And people are not going to be losing their jobs overnight, but believe me, 3- and 4-star generals are usually in their mid-50s. The same with admirals, vice admirals, admirals, full admirals are usually in their mid-50s, and they're on the verge of retirement. So when they retire, Pete Hegseth just simply won't promote more people into their positions, and he'll amalgamate positions, and that's just rational. So should probably we're going to be talking about this story here in a minute, but I wanted to show you. Now, I'm sure you've all seen this. This is how Donald Trump gets treated when he visits the United Nations. The escalator stops.
President Trump Jr.
Too often, it's actually creating new problems for us to solve. The best example is the #1 political issue of our time, the crisis of uncontrolled migration. It's uncontrolled. Your countries are being ruined. The United Nations is funding an assault on Western countries and their borders. In 2024, the UN budgeted $372 million in cash assistance to support an estimated 624,000 migrants journeying into the United States. Think of that. The UN is supporting people that are illegally coming into the United States, and then we have to get them out. The UN also provided food, shelter, transportation, and debit cards to illegal aliens. Can you believe that? On the way to infiltrate our southern border. Millions of people came through that southern border. Just a year ago, millions and millions of people were pouring in, 25 million altogether over the 4 years of the incompetent Biden administration. And now we have it stopped, totally stopped. In fact, they're not even coming anymore because they know they can't get through. But what took place is totally unacceptable. The UN is supposed to stop invasions, not create them and not finance them. In the United States, we reject the idea that mass numbers of people from foreign lands can be permitted to travel halfway around the world, trample our borders, violate our sovereignty, cause unmitigated crime, and deplete our social safety net. We have reasserted that America belongs to the American people, and I encourage all countries to take their own stand in defense of their citizens as well. You have to do that because I see it. I'm not mentioning names. I see it, and I can call every single one of them out. You're destroying your countries. They're being destroyed. Europe is in serious trouble. They've been invaded by a force of illegal aliens like nobody's ever seen before. Illegal aliens are pouring into Europe. Nobody is ever, and nobody's doing anything to change it, to get them out. It's not sustainable. And because they choose to be politically correct, they're doing just absolutely nothing about it. And I have to say, I look at London, where you have a terrible mayor, terrible, terrible mayor, and it's been so changed, so changed. Now they want to go to Sharia law, but you're in a different country. You can't do that. Both the immigration and their suicidal energy ideas will be the death of Western Europe if something is not done immediately. This cannot be sustained. What makes the world so beautiful is that each country is unique. But to stay this way, every sovereign nation must have the right to control their own borders. You have the right to control your borders, as we do now, and to limit the sheer numbers of migrants entering their countries and paid for by the people of that nation.
So I think Donald Trump made an excellent point there, and that's the good part. He also said climate change was a scam in this speech. Unfortunately, he also said Ukraine is going to win the war, and the United States would be with them till the end. We need to end that war between Ukraine and Russia before it accelerates or transforms into a nuclear war. There's no question about that. But he talked about illegal migration, and of course that has created a situation in Great Britain, in the United Kingdom, where they are on the precipice of civil war or revolution, because there are so many people just fed up with the Keir Starmer government bringing in illegal immigrants, and it's not just illegals, it's legal immigrants, and giving them everything they want: the best housing, the best jobs, the best health care. And Britons who have been there their entire life are getting the cold shoulder. They're being told to go pound sand. But Keir Starmer is going to solve the problem with digital ID. Oh, that'll make everything okay. Don't you think the people who are getting the best housing are going to get their digital ID too? It's not just about illegal migrants. And don't you think the illegal migrants will get digital ID too? Just like everywhere, they get health care, they get funding, they get accommodation. They might be illegal, but they don't want to call them that. Here's my prediction. Even if digital ID, or when digital ID is introduced into Great Britain, it will be given to illegals as well, because this is all a sham. This is all about controlling people and surveilling people and knowing exactly what they are, who they are, and what they're doing at all times.
And that is why today I am announcing this government will make a new free-of-charge digital ID mandatory for the right to work by the end of this Parliament. Let me spell that out. You will not be able to work in the United Kingdom if you do not have digital ID. It's as simple as that.
And they'll get their digital ID. It's as simple as that, Herr Keir Starmer. Now, so what's happening with the ostriches? Well, as I said, they had another fire last night. These bales of hay were alight again. Now, when I talked to Katie yesterday, she was surmising that the first fire probably didn't go out entirely. It was simmering, and the winds at night created the necessary conditions for flame to erupt again. Might have happened again, but God only knows what's happening there. And
we've got to address the ostrich situation in British Columbia. This Liberal.
So I want to say, where is Pierre Poilievre on this issue? Well, thankfully, some of his Conservative MPs have been speaking out on this issue, and he has not gagged them. So thank you very much. But I think it takes the leader of the official opposition to stand up and say, this is unacceptable. Stop it. I demand testing of these birds. I demand these birds be tested now, today. The leader of the official opposition needs to stand up and say that. But thankfully, Andrew Scheer, the former leader of the opposition and House leader for the Conservative Party in the House of Commons, is speaking out about the birds, as are other MPs. Let's have a look.
We've got to address the ostrich situation in British Columbia. This Liberal government has done a terrible job being accountable and transparent. These animals are the private property of the farm owners, and if the government is going to come along and forcibly cull these birds, they have to explain why. Mark Carney has to answer for their lack of transparency, for their delays, and for the mismanagement of this issue. We're calling on the government to do the right thing. We've got to address the ostrich situation in British Columbia. This Liberal government has done a terrible job being accountable and transparent. These animals are the private property of the farm owners, and if the government is going to come along and forcibly cull these birds, they have to explain why. Mark Carney has to answer for their lack of transparency, for their delays, and for the mismanagement of this issue. We're calling on the government to do the right thing.
Okay, sorry for that, playing that twice, but I think you needed to hear what Andrew Scheer was saying. And if Andrew Scheer did not have the full support of Pierre Poilievre, he wouldn't be saying that, because there's such a thing as the caucus solidarity. And believe MPs have been gagged in the Conservative Party before, and they're not being gagged right now. So I think Pierre Poilievre is basically on side, but he needs to personally stand up and get involved in this issue, or it might not be effective enough. Goodness knows we've had Conservative MPs speaking out about this issue.
Government has failed to do its job by letting the Canadian Food Inspection Agency order the slaughter of a herd of ostriches with no transparency or communication to farmers or Canadians. Since the beginning, and apparently unlike the CFIA, I've actually met with the farmers and raised their concerns publicly. These farmers love their animals. Senior academics are begging for access to potential research on diseases. Canadians are traveling from all over across the country in outrage. This communication fiasco has been allowed to escalate into a crisis, and now tens of thousands of Canadians have raised their voices on the issue, wanting to know why. This communication, why isn't a Liberal agriculture minister of a herd of ostriches? This communication fiasco has been allowed to escalate into a crisis, and now tens of thousands of Canadians have raised their voices on the issue, wanting to know why. This communication, why isn't a Liberal agriculture minister forcing the CFIA to properly retest these 400 ostriches? Why would the Liberal health minister want to throw away valuable potential medical research? The nation is watching and Canadians demand answers. Why won't you explain yourselves?
Just remind the member that it's through.
I have to say that is the local member of parliament for the Edgewood, BC area.
That much about ostriches.
And
Mr. Speaker, farmers love their animals and would do anything to protect them. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency is planning to cull 400 ostriches in BC because of an outbreak of avian flu. When it comes to animal safety, Canadians expect due diligence and transparency. Canadians are looking to this government to explain why the cull is necessary, but the Liberal government has not posted a public update in over a month. Canadians want to know, why did the Liberal ministers not work with the agriculture sector to resolve this issue?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to make sure that this member knows that I am working very closely with the Minister of Agriculture, and the case is now in front of the court, so I won't comment more.
And I would ask...
So the case is now in front of the court, so I cannot comment. That's your venerable health minister. And of course, these are ministers who don't want to do anything to resolve the situation because they're all in the bag of big pharmacy, big pharmacare. And that is at the root of their desire for inaction because they don't believe in herd mentality. They don't believe it's an option because there's no money in it for big pharma. There's lots of money in vaccines. There's tens, hundreds of billions of dollars of money in vaccines. Whether they work or not, whether they're tested or not, we know herd mentality works. The ostriches demonstrated that. That's why they're healthy. Going on 300 days. What is wrong with this government? And I keep pushing that point home. Is there a political agenda here? Well, of course it is. This is about absolutely stifling property rights in this country, destroying the livelihood of farmers, intimidating the agricultural sector, showing ordinary Canadians who's boss in this country. The bozos and the clowns who are in public office, they're the bosses. You will be their servants. They will be the masters, and you will do what they say. That's the political agenda here, and it's bloody obvious.
And thank you for your answers. If you would also table with the committee, we had known that with the chief redress officer as part of the CFIA, it was a very critical office that was eliminated by the Liberal government. And we know that almost 27% or well over a quarter of all the complaints brought in by customers and producers and businesses to the CFIA were justified, and many of those decisions had to be reversed. Can you table with this committee an updated report on how many CFIA complaints were received since 2015 to present, broken down by subject matter, by province, and the outcome of those complaints? That would be very helpful to this report as well.
Well, you're not going to get any help from these people because they don't want to help. They want this to just go away, and they want these ostriches dead. Ain't going to happen, folks. I want you to listen to this a portion of this interview with a UBC professor who should have been a witness at the appeals court in Ottawa when Universal Ostrich Farms appealed the decision to kill their animals. Now, this has been completely working against the ostrich farm from the very beginning. CFIA did not do adequate testing. And this is what this professor is talking about. They are refusing to retest right now. And if the ostrich farm does the testing, $200,000 fine, 6 months in jail for each bird they test, which is, of course, beyond absurd. How stupid is this government? How corrupt? That's the question we're asking. How corrupt is this procedure? How corrupt is the system? I say it's intensely and thoroughly corrupted. The CFIA are bouncing around the farm in their spacesuits looking like idiots trying to lasso ostriches. We can't be trusted to feed the birds because they want to kill them. Katie has wondered, would it potentially be giving them something that's toxic because they want these birds dead? Or they want to show that they're somehow not healthy? And when the Universal Ostrich Farms came to the appeal court in Ottawa a couple of months back, all of the evidence presented came from the Government of Canada, CFIA. They have not been allowed to state their case or prove their case because the Government of Canada, the Liberal government, the Marxist Carney government, knows that they're wrong and the farm is right. And the Carney government wants to intimidate farmers like it wants nothing more. Now, here, this is an interview. My good friend Jason Levine, who's been on this show, and I've been on his show several times, talks to somebody who really is an expert, not a let's pretend expert, but a real one.
The good news is that the chances that these birds actually still have H5N1 virus is from everything I know of my experience, and I've been involved in immunology research for a good 40 years. I've been on faculty at UBC for 38, but I've been running biotech companies for 30 years, producing antibodies, by the way, in rabbits against cancer proteins and proteins involved in neurological diseases. So I know a lot about the production of antibodies and how stable they are. And the reality is that these, from the standpoint of a risk that these are infectious for H5N1, to me, that risk is it's astronomically low. There's been absolutely no evidence provided by the Canadian Food Inspection Agency with these birds, because they refused to test them after they did only basically taking samples from 2 birds that had died, and these carcasses are more than 24 hours old, on the ground, basically. They took and took samples from the mouth and the anus of the 2 dead birds, and they didn't even do a control when they did the PCR testing to see that the samples were actually confirmed to be from an ostrich. I mean, you may say, well, but this is where they got the samples from. But don't forget that this is being sent to a facility where they're routinely testing all these other samples right next to each other. And the thing about the PCR test, it is so sensitive that cross-contamination is actually extremely common and a very high potential. So usually we have a control where you actually demonstrate that you have ostrich RNA that's there in addition to the particular RNA that you're trying to test for from the virus, okay? So they didn't, as far as I'm aware, do that. So they don't have a control. They're doing at very high cycle threshold numbers. And so what that means is the more cycle threshold numbers you have to do in the PCR test, the more you amplify the amount of original starting material. And so when you're doing something in the order of 36 cycles, that's 2 to the 36 power each. You're doubling the amount of material in each cycle. But it's an enzymatic reaction done by an enzyme that can induce errors into the structure of the RNA. Ultimately, it starts with RNA, but it's converted to a DNA copy, and then that's what's amplified. So you actually get each cycle introduces mutations in the sequence of what you're trying to amplify. And so you get essentially not only amplifying what would be active virus, but you're amplifying more often when you're getting to those high threshold numbers, the remnants and pieces of the RNA that's left over. And so you get like a 90% false positive rate. Now, to the credit of the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, they did subsequently, and this is after they gave the order for the cull, sequence the entire genome. And that's when they found out that it was in fact an H5N1 virus. Prior to that, they did not know. They did not test for the N1 gene from the virus. All they tested was whether it was H5 or H7. They did not test that it was highly pathogenic or low pathogenicity. And yet they made the claim in the courts, and this was repeated in the judge's decisions, that this was an H5N1 highly pathogenic virus was identified at the time that they did the cull order. And so everything they've done since then has been to try to prove, their case. And yes, it did turn out to be H5N1, but it was a mix of the genes from a high pathogenicity version with a low pathogenicity version. There's these 10 genes.
So the CFIA has been lying from day one, and all the evidence that they have been putting forth is just to justify and prove the conclusion they made without any evidence in the beginning. That's why they won't test these birds now to see how they are today. Not last November. Not last November. Why are they doing this? Because yeah, as somebody just pointed out, the World Health Organization standards or lack of standards have superseded Canadian law, have superseded Canadian health regulations. We are doing the bidding of the World Health Organization. And people are going to not only suffer on this farm, but potentially hundreds of others. We're going to be killing poultry, pork, and cattle based on trumped up charges of them having a disease. And that's the only way is to kill them or vaccinate them, but forget about herd immunity. That's what's going on here. And I don't think I have ever been this frustrated with a Canadian government. I want to show this to you here because this is incredible. One of the barriers to trade has been the fact that the Americans suspect there is avian influenza in certain areas of Canada, and the CFIA won't test to prove it wrong. They would rather have financial collapse. They would rather have trade collapse than to be proven wrong and to go against the World Health Organization, to go against the big pharma and their vaccines. They would rather have complete collapse in Canada before they admit that. Because who are their masters? Well, I think that's pretty obvious. Now, one more image to show you here, because there's hope. You know, and I sure as hell wish I was a farm aide. Just today, tomorrow. So this is a crucial weekend. And we need people on the site. We need people at this concert. We need media at this concert. And once again, I praise those who have tried their best to get the news out about this potential tragedy in Edgewood, BC. Thank you, Rebel News, for sending not one reporter, but two reporters to the farm a couple of days ago to cover this story. Thank you, David Freiheit, for the work that you've done. Thank you for those courageous broadcasters who finally decided to report this story, even though they know it's going to be suppressed on social media because the government doesn't want the story out. My challenge is to those broadcasters who are largely propagandists for a political party to get off your ass and do something about this story. Yeah, you might not get the same numbers that day, but do it because it's the right thing to do. And this is about Canadian sovereignty vis-a-vis the World Health Organization and foundational democratic human rights in Canada, such as the right to own property. The Conservative MPs, to their credit, are finally getting it. This is a gross violation of property rights, gross violation, invasion of your home, gross violation of ownership of your livestock, gross violation of your rights. And we're finally getting something from the Conservative government, the Conservative opposition on this. And I challenge the broadcasters who won't touch this story, the so-called small c conservatives, do something about this story. You might not get the same numbers that day, but you'll be doing the right thing. And I can't say enough about that. So Farm Aid continues. Now, I want to show a bit of question period because I have been ignoring question period all week. But you know what I've been trying to say here, and actually, I've got to show. This is incredibly important. This is incredibly important. Kayla Pollock, who was on this show. Kayla Pollock has, of course, applied to the vaccine injury program and received exactly nothing. Her lawyer is the same lawyer representing Universal Ostrich Farms. And here's what Kayla posted late last night, I think. The BC ostrich farm shows the same pattern I've lived. Government overreach, no compassion, and treating life as disposable. Whether it's farmers losing 400 birds or me paralyzed from COVID shot and offered medical euthanasia instead of care, the message is the same. Ottawa decides, we suffer. Michaela says, I support the ostriches. They don't deserve to be culled. Neither do I. Vaccine injured Canadians like me were promised care. Instead, we're left to suffer or be offered medical euthanasia. She's been offered euthanasia at least twice, rather than assistance. It's not ostriches versus us. It's all of us being treated as disposable lives. So the government can prove a point. Precisely, Kayla. That is exactly what's going on here. Now, I want to show this to you as well, because I think this is incredibly important. Alberta, again, is showing the resistance to the federal government that we need to see. And I just showed it. Alberta considers new law allowing it to ignore international agreements signed by Canada. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith's government says it is planning to introduce legislation that would allow it to ignore international agreements signed by Ottawa. The future legislation is listed in a new mandate letter Smith issued this week to the government's Intergovernmental Affairs Relations Ministry, which the Premier heads. The letter says it's about protecting Alberta's authority, and Smith's office added in a statement that it's also an issue of due process. Thank God there's one premier in Canada. Thank God there's one premier in Canada who has the guts to stand up to this authoritarian federal government. And Danielle Smith has also said she's going to stand behind lawful gun owners as the government attempts again to steal their guns. I'm just going to show a bit from question period yesterday, and that incompetent public safety minister continues to be in his office. Mark Carney won't fire him, and he won't resign, despite, I think it's Gary Ananda saying, if I got his name right, despite privately being taped saying the gun buyback program won't work, and it's all about politics. But this guy hasn't got the balls to admit he's lying, he doesn't believe in the program, and he's an idiot.
Oral questions, questions orales, l'honorable.
Oral questions, the honourable member for Mégantic-L'Érable.
Le ministre de la Sécurité.
The Minister of Public Safety behaved like a true Liberal this week. He said one thing in private and the opposite in public. In a shocking recording taken without his knowledge, the minister admitted that the gun buyback program is not worth the money spent on it, that it will not be effective in preventing crime, and that it is designed to score political points in Quebec. But, like a good Liberal, he went ahead with his costly, awful program for honest hunters anyway. As he's been deceiving Canadians, gun crimes have increased by 130% under this Liberal regime. Will this Prime Minister finally fire the Minister of Public Safety? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Thank you for the question.
And I want to take this opportunity to talk about our compensation program that we launched this week. As you know, Cape Breton will be the pilot where we launch this program. People can register starting on October the 1st. We are making sure that those prohibited weapons are off our streets, but at the same time ensuring that law-abiding gun owners are able to get fair compensation for turning in or deactivating their prohibited weapon, Madam Speaker.
Now, why would Mark Carney put a clown like this in public safety? This is a very important function of the federal government. It's a very important role in cabinet. And this is not the first time Gary Anasangari has been mired in controversy. We know he's made some extremely dubious decisions in the past, and the sort of people he's recommended come to Canada. So why? Because Mark Carney's his own public safety minister. Mark Carney is everybody's cabinet minister. I've said this before. Mark Carney walking down the street talking to himself, that's a cabinet meeting. And this is what Mark Carney is doing. And I'll just play one more clip from this guy, because is Canada corrupt? How corrupt is it? Well, a guy like this can stay as public safety minister, although he's probably the least qualified guy in the whole caucus to be there. And he can stand up there and not even acknowledge that he's admitted the program doesn't work, because he wants to just pretend. He's playing politics, and he's pretending, oh, I want to keep my job, so I'm going to say the program's really good and it's going to work for somebody. Sure as hell won't work to in any way reduce crime in this country, because the crimes are committed by people with illegal firearms. That's who's doing the job, not farmers with their 22s.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic, l'Érable, Lot-Binière. Well, I welcome the Minister to read this morning's papers. In Le Devoir this morning, they reported the Minister of Public Safety has just done an excellent job of joining the ranks of those who are failing in their duties. The Ontario Attorney General's office was quite harsh, saying the firearms buyback program does nothing to address the root causes of gun violence in our communities. That's what the Minister of Public Safety himself thinks deep down. He said so in a recording, Madam Speaker, after being caught red-handed telling the truth, which in itself is a true scandal for a Liberal, and doing nothing about the rise in crime in the country. What is the Prime Minister waiting for to fire him? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker.
He's waiting for hell to freeze over to fire him, because I don't think anything this guy does is going to be indictable for firing.
The Minister of Public Safety is fulfilling our election commitments. On this side of the House, we have always tried to make it impossible to use assault-style weapons on our streets. There have been tragedies throughout Canada. Canadians cannot support the possibility that people can access assault weapons. Hunters have told us that they don't need those weapons for hunting. But in this debate, Conservatives have always been against that.
Public Safety Minister says the Liberal gun buyback program is a politically motivated scam and it won't work. But in public he supports it, but in private he calls it a politically motivated scam that won't work. Talking out of both sides of your mouth should be a fireable offense. But
I just want to go to the last guy who speaks here, because I think it's quite good. Here it is. Yeah, you've got it.
Member for Bruce Grey, Owen Sound.
Madam Speaker, I want to commend the Minister of Public Safety for accidentally telling the truth with respect to the Liberal gun confiscation program. I fully agree taking legal firearms from trained, vetted, and licensed hunters, farmers, sport shooters, military members, veterans, and law enforcement is a waste of money. Out of the $742 million allocated for this gun grab, only $250 million is for compensating legal gun owners, while $500 million is allocated to the bureaucracy for this useless program. Why is the government focused on targeting law-abiding firearms owners instead of criminals?
Because we're living in a narco-tyranny. I've got the answer. Why are they targeting law-abiding gun owners? Why are they targeting Universal Ostrich Farms? Why are they targeting Tamara Leach and Chris Barber? Why are they targeting people who just happen to disagree with the Liberal narrative and letting criminals do their dirty work? Because we live in a narco-tyranny where a government spends most of its time and resources persecuting, prosecuting, and punishing its political enemies and not going after the real criminals. That's the Canada we live in. When I come back, some concluding remarks. Yes, and you saw Tamara Leach in that ad. And by the way, have a look at the store. And those of you who have supported, we thank you from the bottom of our hearts. But Tamara Leach, of course, was kind enough to provide a picture of herself wearing one of our hoodies. I contacted Tamara last week and said, Tara, can you think you can get to the Universal Ostrich Farms? Because you become an icon of Canadian freedom. And it would mean so much if you were there. And she said, I don't know. It's a long way and I've got so much to do. And I said, well, we'll leave it with you. She will be there for the Farm Aid concert. And Tamara loves to do concerts for righteous and good causes. Thank you, Tamara. And when I was speaking to Katie yesterday, she confirmed that Tamara Leach would be part of the Farm Aid concert. Now, I want to revisit this for a minute. This is hype. Now, when you're looking at your options it's on YouTube. You have to go over to Hype. Go past Remix. Thanks. Go to Hype. And do it twice. But you can really help me out by doing this. And it would be so appreciated because it would get around the algorithm that's used against me and the suppression I face every day on YouTube. And God bless you for doing that. Thanks for watching today, folks. I think we're going to do an earlier show tomorrow because it's Sunday. So, and possibly on at 9:30. But thank you for watching today. And you guys are fantastic. And we're going to keep fighting for freedom at Universal Ostrich Farms and everywhere where freedom is endangered by this authoritarian, liberal, carny, Marxist government. Thank you for your help. Thank you for your support. And we'll be back again tomorrow. God bless all of you. Godspeed to all of you. And God bless what's left of this country because it is literally, well, I shouldn't say literally. It's metaphorically staggering on its feet. Thanks for watching.